Imagine sending your child to the bathroom, just a few hundred feet away. You can almost see them from where you stand. And then they vanish, gone, as if the earth itself swallowed them whole. Or imagine a 4-year-old boy riding his tricycle, playing in the sunshine. His father drives away for just 10 minutes to get firewood. When he returns, his son has disappeared into the vast wilderness, never to be seen again. Or picture a young man, 24 years old, parking his car at a scenic overlook. He walks into the forest and is never heard from again. These are not scenes from a horror movie. These are real cases, real people, real families torn apart by the unexplainable. National parks, places of beauty, places of wonder, but also places where people vanish without a trace, where search parties find nothing, where answers never come, where families wait decades for closure that may never arrive. This is the story of 3 people who disappeared in America's wilderness. Kurt Newton, Laura Bradbury, Derek Luking. 3 different cases, 3 different parks, 3 different decades, but all connected by one haunting question. What happened to them? September 1st, 1975, Labor Day weekend, a time for families to enjoy the last days of summer before school starts. For the Newton family from Manchester, Maine, it was supposed to be a perfect camping trip. The Natanas Point Campground in Chain of Ponds, Maine, a remote, beautiful location just 6 miles from the Canadian border. The Newtons were camping with 3 other families from their hometown. Parents, children, laughter, campfires. Everything a family camping trip should be. 4-year-old Kurt Ronald Newton was the youngest of the group. He had blonde hair, blue eyes, and a shy personality. His parents described him as a child who didn't like being separated from his mother, even for a short time. He had no history of wandering away. He was cautious, careful, the kind of kid who stayed close. That Sunday morning, September 1st, the families finished breakfast around the campfire. The mothers went to the boathouse to wash dirty shoes. The fathers prepared to gather firewood. The children played nearby. Kurt was riding his big wheel tricycle, that iconic plastic tricycle every child in the 1970s had. Red, yellow, blue. The sound of plastic wheels on dirt roads. Kurt pedaled around the campsite, happy and carefree. His father, along with another dad, drove off to get firewood. They would be gone maybe 10, 15 minutes. No more than that. The campground was safe, secluded. What could possibly go wrong? Kurt's sister was playing a game with other children. And then she heard it. A voice. Kurt's voice. Calling out, "Daddy, Daddy." Apparently, Kurt had seen his father's vehicle driving away. And in his 4-year-old mind, he wanted to follow. To catch up, he ran to his big wheel tricycle and began pedaling. Fast, down the logging road, chasing after his daddy. 11-year-old Lou Ellen Hansen was the last person to see Kurt alive. Between 10:30 and 11 a.m., she spotted him riding his tricycle on a woods road, about 0.4 miles from the campground. He was headed west, away from the camp, pedaling as fast as his little legs could go. And then he was gone. When Kurt's father returned with the firewood, he expected to see his son playing. But Kurt wasn't there. The family searched the immediate area, calling his name, looking behind trees, checking the lake. Nothing. Panic set in. They expanded the search. And about 0.8 miles from the campground, near a dump site where campers have been throwing their garbage for years, they found something. Kurt's big wheel tricycle. Abandoned. Empty. But no Kurt. What followed was described as the most extensive woods search in the history of Maine. Hundreds of volunteers, military helicopters, bloodhounds, search and rescue teams, state police, local authorities, everyone who could help did. They combed the dense Maine wilderness. The forests surrounding Chain of Ponds are thick, unforgiving, easy to get lost in, especially for a 4-year-old child. The night after Kurt disappeared, temperatures dropped below freezing. If Kurt was out there alone, without shelter, he wouldn't survive long. Every hour that passed decreased the chances of finding him alive. Investigators interviewed everyone at the campground. They used polygraph tests when they had doubts. They checked every lead, every possibility, and then a witness came forward with something chilling. A camper reported seeing a white station wagon roar out of the campground shortly after Kurt disappeared. It left a cloud of dust in its wake. It was moving fast, too fast for a campground. But here's the problem. No white station wagon was registered at the campground. Nobody else reported seeing it. It was like a ghost car. Had someone taken Kurt, abducted him in broad daylight? Experienced trackers examined the logging roads. They found no evidence of recent vehicle traffic beyond the point where Kurt's father had been cutting wood. The only road available for a so-called backdoor abduction showed no signs of use. Police sent teletype descriptions of Kurt throughout the United States and Canada. French-language missing child posters were distributed in Quebec, just miles across the border. The theory was that if someone had taken Kurt, they might have fled into Canada. Weeks later, a call came from a man in Connecticut. He had just returned from camping in the Canadian Rockies. There, he said, he noticed a small blonde-haired boy staring at him with a quizzical expression. The boy seemed nervous. The man he was with seemed nervous. Something felt wrong. But when authorities tried to track down this lead, it went nowhere. The man couldn't provide enough details. The sighting couldn't be confirmed. Years passed. Kurt's parents never stopped searching. They mailed posters with his picture to every school district in the United States. They held on to hope that maybe somewhere their son was alive. Maybe he'd been taken and raised by someone else. Maybe one day he'd come home. But he never did. Kurt Newton has never been found. No remains, no clothing, no evidence. Just a big-wheel tricycle abandoned near a dump site. He would be 53 years old today. Somewhere out there, does Kurt Newton still exist? Or did he perish in those frozen Maine woods on September 1st, 1975? Nobody knows. October 18th, 1984. Joshua Tree National Park, California. A stunning desert landscape of twisted trees, massive boulders, and endless sky. A place of beauty and mystery. The Bradbury family from Huntington Beach loved Joshua Tree. Mike and Patty Bradbury had 3 children. 8-year-old Travis, 3.5-year-old Laura, and baby Emily. They lived in a cramped 2-bedroom condominium, so Joshua Tree offered space. Freedom. Adventure. Laura and Bradbury had blonde hair and blue eyes. She was bright, curious, full of energy. A typical 3-year-old who loved exploring and playing. That Thursday afternoon, the family set up camp at Indian Cove Campground. It was a familiar spot. They'd been there before. They knew the area. They felt safe. After setting up, Laura and her brother Travis walked to the portable restrooms near the campground. It was a short walk, maybe a couple hundred feet from their campsite. Laura stayed outside while Travis went in. He was inside for maybe 2-3 minutes. When he came out, Laura was gone. Travis ran back to his parents. "Where's Laura?" they asked. "I don't know," he said. "She was right there, and now she's gone." Mike and Patty Bradbury immediately started searching. They called out Laura's name. They checked nearby campsites. They asked other campers if they'd seen a little blonde girl. Nobody had. Within hours, over 250 people were searching Joshua Tree National Park for Laura Bradbury. Park rangers, local sheriff's department, volunteers, helicopters, horses, dogs. The search was massive. A bloodhound picked up Laura's scent and followed what appeared to be tracks from her flip-flops. The dog tracked for about 2 miles, and then the scent vanished, just stopped, as if Laura had been picked up and carried away. After 3 days of intensive searching, authorities called off the official search. They had found nothing. No clothing, no footprints beyond those initial tracks. No sign of Laura. But the investigation revealed something disturbing. Multiple witnesses reported seeing a man in his 50s, bearded, pot-bellied, driving a metallic blue van. He was seen at Indian Cove Campground shortly before Laura disappeared. He was seen again at Burns Canyon, about 23 miles away, several hours after Laura vanished. He appeared to be taking the back road toward Big Bear Lake. Authorities brought in a hypnotist to try to coax more details from witnesses who had seen the man and his van. They created a sketch. They issued bulletins across California. Be on the lookout for this man, this van. But like Laura, the man seemed to have disappeared into thin air. Mike and Patty Bradbury refused to give up. They stayed at the park. They set up a camper and lived there for weeks. Searching, waiting, hoping. Mike accompanied search teams deep into the desert. Patty wrote letters, made phone calls, begged anyone who would listen to keep looking for their daughter. Their 8-year-old son Travis was traumatized. He was the last person to see his sister. He felt guilty. His parents worried he would carry that guilt forever. To help him cope, they let him care for a stray cat he found at the park. Something to focus on, something to love. Within weeks of Laura's disappearance, Mike and Patty created the Laura Center in Orange County, a nonprofit organization dedicated to finding their daughter. They mailed flyers, held news conferences. Laura was one of the first children featured on milk cartons across America. Actor Ricky Schroeder starred the sitcom Silver Spoons, and a distant relative of Patty Bradbury joined a national tour publicizing Laura's case. The story was featured on the first episode of an NBC television special called Missing. Have You Seen This Person?, which aired in April 1985. Tips poured in. Hundreds of reported sightings. Laura in Mexico. Laura in Big Bear. Laura in Nevada. But none could be substantiated. And then, something dark happened. In June 1985, 8 months after Laura's disappearance, a couple came forward with information. Clifford Bill LaVille, 42, and his girlfriend Toby Santangelo, 22, told police they believed they knew who killed Laura. They said it was a drug dealer named Allen who lived in the Morongo Basin area. 1 month later, in July 1985, both Clifford and Toby were found shot to death, buried in shallow graves in the Joshua Tree National Forest, about 7 miles from where Laura had vanished. Near their bodies, investigators found a green sweatshirt, just like one Laura owned. The man convicted of their murders? His name was Alan Stevens, the same name the couple had given police. Stevens was questioned after Laura's disappearance. He was questioned again after the murders, but investigators found no connection between him and Laura's case. Was it a coincidence? Or was there something darker at play? In March 1986, nearly 2 years after Laura disappeared, hikers found a skull and other bone fragments near the park's west entrance, only 5 miles from the Bradbury family's campsite. Initial DNA tests in 1990 suggested the skull belonged to Laura, but the results were inconclusive. In 2010, new DNA testing confirmed with 99% accuracy that the skull was Laura's. But here's where things get strange. Mike Bradbury claims that shortly after the skull was found in 1986 or 87, authorities showed him and his wife a much smaller skull, about 3 inches. They said it was Laura's. But decades later, when Mike was shown slides of the skull currently in the coroner's possession, it was a full-size skull, 7 inches by 5 inches, missing teeth and the lower jaw. Mike asked the obvious question: if the 2 skulls look completely different, which one is actually Laura's? And if the one he was shown in the 80s wasn't Laura's, whose skull was it? The San Bernardino County Coroner's Office never issued a death certificate for Laura. Even in 2010, 26 years after her disappearance, Mike Bradbury was unable to claim his daughter's remains because no death certificate existed. Patty Bradbury died in 2001. She spent 17 years searching for her daughter, writing letters to Laura, praying for her return. She died without answers. Mike Bradbury wrote a book in 2010 called Laura and Bradbury: A Father's Search. He continues to fight for the truth. But to this day, Laura's case remains unsolved. No arrests, no answers, just a skull and a family destroyed. March 15th, 2012. 37 years after Kurt Newton disappeared. 28 years after Laura Bradbury vanished. Another person would disappear into America's wilderness. Derek Joseph Luking was 24 years old. He was born in Northern Virginia and graduated from Johnson University, formerly Johnson Bible College, in Knoxville, Tennessee. He worked as an aide at Peninsula Behavioral Health Center. His nickname was Drock. Friends and family called him DJ. Derek was an avid camper. He loved the outdoors. He was a huge fan of the survival television show Man vs. Wild, where host Bear Grylls would be dropped into remote wilderness locations and forced to survive using minimal resources. In early March 2012, Derek's father Tim noticed changes in his son. Derek started drinking, smoking cigarettes, behaviors that were highly unusual for him. Derek seemed unhappy with his job, unhappy with where his life was going. Tim assumed it was just post-graduation stress, the difficult transition to adulthood. On March 15th, Derek didn't show up for work. His roommate, Ryan Molden, noticed Derek's alarm going off continuously. He assumed Derek had left early for work and forgotten to turn it off. But when a mutual friend called to say Derek never arrived at work, Ryan knew something was wrong. Ryan contacted Derek's parents in Virginia. They drove through the night to Tennessee. When they arrived at Derek's home, they checked his computer. Derek had been searching for information about the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. He had made a reservation at a hotel near the park. He had also purchased supplies, maps of the Great Smoky Mountains, a tent, a sleeping bag, a military survival manual, a Gerber axe, a knife sharpener, a combination compass and thermometer, 100 feet of black parachute cord, a headlamp, a pocket knife, granola bars, a Bear Grylls survival tool pack, including a small flashlight, fire starter, and multi-tool. Derek was planning something. But what? On March 17th, surveillance video showed Derek leaving the Microtel Inn and Suites in Cherokee, North Carolina, at 4 a.m. He was wearing a gray hooded sweatshirt, dark track pants with white stripes, and dark sneakers. He was carrying what appeared to be a small day pack. In his hotel room, his family found a Bible on the bed, an empty liquor bottle on the floor. That morning, Derek's family drove to the Great Smoky Mountains to search for him. By sheer luck, they found his white Ford Escape in the parking lot at Newfound Gap, a popular scenic overlook on the border between Tennessee and North Carolina. Inside the car, they found most of Derek's supplies: the tent, the sleeping bag, many of the survival tools he'd purchased. Left behind, and on the dashboard a note. Handwritten, it said, "Don't try to follow me." Park rangers immediately launched a massive search. About 60 people, 3 dog teams, 14 search teams walking over 70 miles of trails surrounding Newfound Gap. The weather that day was perfect. Sunny, mild. The area was packed with tourists, hikers, families taking photos, hundreds of people. But here's the disturbing part. Not a single person reported seeing Derek Luking. Not one. Bob Miller, a spokesman for Great Smoky Mountains National Park, called it the most disturbing thing about Derek's disappearance. There was a ton of people in the park that day, Miller said. It was a nice day. Doesn't mean he got off the trail right away. Maybe, if Derek had stayed on the trails, someone would have seen him. The trails were busy, popular, but off-trail? That's a different story. Once off-trail, only the most experienced outdoorsmen can successfully navigate the Smokies' 500,000 acres of wilderness. Steep terrain, dense forests, rhododendron thickets, so thick you can't pass through them without leaving evidence. Derek, by all accounts, was not an experienced outdoorsman. Search teams explored every area where someone could easily get off the trail. They looked for tracks, clues, anything indicating Derek had passed that way. They searched until they reached barriers, unsafe areas, places where Derek couldn't have gone without leaving a trace. They found nothing. Derek's family spent days at the park. His father, Tim, and other family members handed out flyers to every hiker they saw. They stayed up all night, looking out at the mountains, hoping to see the glimmer of a campfire, hoping Derek was out there, alive, waiting to be found. But as days turned into weeks, hope faded. Authorities considered multiple theories. Was Derek trying to clear his mind after a difficult year? The date of his disappearance fell around the one-year anniversary of his grandfather's death. Derek had been very close to his grandfather. Was he grieving? Or was Derek attempting his own man versus wild experience? Testing himself in the wilderness with minimal supplies? His family said he was obsessed with that show. Maybe he wanted to prove he could survive like Bear Grylls. Or was the note, "Don't try to follow me," a suicide note? Was Derek planning to harm himself in the wilderness? His family and friends disputed that theory. They said Derek didn't have severe depression or suicidal tendencies. But his father admitted Derek had been drinking more, smoking, acting differently. The searches continued for weeks, but eventually they had to stop. The park is too vast, too dangerous, too unpredictable. Derek Joseph Luking has never been found. No remains, no clothing, no evidence. Just a white Ford Escape in a parking lot. A note, and a family left wondering. He would be 37 years old today. 3 people, 3 national parks, 3 decades. Kurt Newton disappeared from a campground in Maine in 1975. 3 years old, never found. Laura Bradbury disappeared from Joshua Tree National Park in California in 1984. 3 years old, a skull was found, but her case remains unsolved. Derek Luking disappeared from Great Smoky Mountains National Park in North Carolina in 2012. 24 years old, never found. These cases are not unique. Every year, hundreds of people vanish in America's national parks. Some are found, many are not. The National Park Service maintains a list of cold cases, missing persons whose disappearances remain unsolved. The list is long, heartbreaking. What makes these cases so haunting is the lack of evidence. How can someone vanish so completely? How can search teams, helicopters, dogs, and hundreds of volunteers find nothing? Some believe there are natural explanations. People get lost. They fall. They succumb to the elements. The wilderness is unforgiving. It doesn't leave traces. Others believe something more sinister is at play. Abductions, foul play, predators, both human and animal. And some believe in theories that sound like science fiction. Disappearances linked to strange geographical patterns. Missing people who vanish near bodies of water, in areas with unusual geological features. These theories are controversial, but for families desperate for answers, no theory is too far-fetched. For the families left behind, the pain never ends. The Newtons, the Bradburys, the Lukings, they wake up every day with the same questions. Where are they? What happened? Are they still out there? National parks are places of beauty, but they're also places of mystery. And for some, they're places where loved ones disappeared forever. If you have any information about Kurt Newton, Laura Bradbury, or Derek Luking, please contact the appropriate authorities. Even after decades, tips can still make a difference. Because somewhere out there, families are still waiting, still hoping, still searching for answers that may never come. The wilderness keeps its secrets, but we will never stop asking questions.